A cocky young lawyer stood in the courtroom, hurling insults at the handcuffed homeless veteran before him. But when the door suddenly swung open and a decorated 4-star general marched in, the lawyer's smirk vanished. What happened next left everyone in that courtroom speechless. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment on where you're watching from. Let's get started. They say justice wears a blindfold, but in the marble hallways of the Harrison County Courthouse, it had been wearing blinders instead. For decades, an unspoken hierarchy had determined who received mercy and who received the maximum. The system didn't just have flaws, it had favorites. Then came the day when Alexander Mitchell, the rising star of the district attorney's office, faced Marcus Johnson in holding cell 3. It should have been routine, just another homeless defendant to process before lunch. But neither man knew that within 24 hours, their encounter would shatter careers, expose corruption, and reveal how thin the veneer of civility truly was in the hallowed halls of justice. Alexander Mitchell straightened his custom-tailored suit jacket as he strode through the courthouse security checkpoint. At 28, he was the youngest prosecutor in the DA's office, having graduated top of his class from Harvard Law. His rapid ascent from law clerk to lead prosecutor on felony cases had raised eyebrows, but his conviction rate silenced doubters. The security guards nodded deferentially as he passed, his Italian leather briefcase swinging lightly at his side. "Morning, Mr. Mitchell," called Officer Rivera, holding the elevator door. "Big day with the Thompson case, right?" "Should be straightforward," Alex replied, his voice carrying the practiced confidence he'd perfected through 3 years of mock trial competitions. "Just need to clear some preliminary matters first. Some vagrant case they added to my calendar last minute." The elevator doors closed, and Alex checked his reflection in the polished metal, adjusting his crimson tie. His mentor, District Attorney William Hayes, had taught him appearance mattered almost as much as argument in court. "Juries decide whether to trust you in the first 30 seconds, Hayes would say. "Make them count." When the doors opened on the 3rd floor, Alex was already reviewing strategy for the Thompson embezzlement case, the vagrant matter barely registering in his thoughts. He had an hour to dispose of it before meeting with the Thompson witnesses. The holding area adjacent to courtroom 3B smelled of industrial disinfectant, masking the human odors beneath. Alex wrinkled his nose slightly as he approached the guard station. "Mitchell for the Johnson case," he said briskly. "Can we get this moving? I've got the Thompson matter at 11. Officer Garcia glanced up from her paperwork. "Sure thing, counselor. He's in 3. Public defender called in sick, so they're sending someone from legal aid. Should be here any minute." Alex fought back a sigh of irritation. Legal aid attorneys were notorious for causing delays with their excessive concerns for clients who, in his experience, were usually guilty anyway. "I'll talk to him while we wait," Alex decided, checking his watch. "Maybe we can wrap this up with a quick plea." Cell 3 was at the end of the narrow hallway. Alex flipped through the case file as he walked. Marcus Johnson, 58, African-American, arrested for trespassing and disorderly conduct. Prior arrests for similar offenses. Probably another career homeless person who'd refused services and preferred living on the streets. Officer Garcia unlocked the heavy door, revealing a small concrete room with a metal table bolted to the floor. Seated at the table, hands cuffed to a metal loop, was a thin black man in an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His gray-flecked beard was neatly trimmed despite his circumstances, and his eyes, deep brown and surprisingly clear, assessed Alex with quiet dignity. 20 minutes, Mr. Mitchell," Garcia said, closing the door behind him. Alex set his briefcase on the table and remained standing, maintaining the position of power his mentor had always advocated when dealing with defendants. "Mr. Johnson, I'm Alexander Mitchell from the District Attorney's Office. I'll be handling your case this morning. Johnson nodded silently, his gaze steady. Your record shows this isn't your first time facing these charges, Alex continued, his tone clipped and professional. Given your history, the court is unlikely to be lenient. However, if you're willing to plead guilty, I can recommend 30 days with time served. Johnson tilted his head slightly. And if I'm not guilty, counselor? Alex suppressed a smile. They always claimed innocence, even when caught red-handed. The officer's report states you were aggressively panhandling outside the Westfield building and refused to leave when asked. When security approached, you became belligerent. These facts, combined with your history, make conviction highly probable. Reports can be mistaken, Johnson replied, his voice surprisingly articulate. I wasn't panhandling. I was waiting for someone. Alex glanced at his watch. Mr. Johnson, I understand the system can seem unfair, but claiming innocence against clear evidence only wastes the court's time and potentially results in a harsher sentence. Is seeking the truth a waste of the court's time, Mr. Mitchell? I thought that was its purpose. Something in Johnson's calm demeanor irritated Alex. Most defendants were appropriately intimidated by his position, his education, his power to influence their fate. This homeless man's dignity felt almost like insubordination. The truth, Alex said, his voice hardening, is that you've been arrested multiple times for similar offenses. The truth is that productive members of society shouldn't have to step over people like you on their way to work. The truth is that my office has better things to do than repeatedly process career transients who refuse to accept help or change their circumstances. For the first time, Johnson's expression changed, not to anger or shame, but to something resembling pity. You see the uniform and the handcuffs and you think you know me, Johnson said quietly. That's a dangerous assumption for a prosecutor to make. Alex felt a flash of anger at being lectured by a homeless defendant. What I know, Mr. Johnson, is that I've worked incredibly hard to get where I am. I earned my success through discipline and sacrifice, while people like you make excuses and expect handouts. Johnson's eyes narrowed slightly. People like me? Chronic offenders who drain public resources and contribute nothing, Alex clarified, gathering his papers. Now, do you want the plea deal or not? It's the best offer you'll get. You know nothing about service or sacrifice, son, Johnson said, his voice taking on a new weight. But you'll learn. The door opened as Officer Garcia returned. Legal aid attorneys here, Mr. Mitchell. Alex straightened his jacket, irritated by the entire exchange. We're finished anyway. The defendant isn't being reasonable. We'll proceed with the arraignment. As he turned to leave, Johnson spoke again. Young man, do you know General James Harrington? Alex froze, his hand on the doorknob. General James Harrington was more than just a four-star general. He was the most influential mentor in Alex's life. The general had personally recommended Alex for Harvard Law after being impressed by his debate performance in a high school competition. They still met for dinner whenever the general visited town, though it had been several months since their last meeting. What did you say? Alex turned slowly. General Harrington, Johnson repeated calmly. My commanding officer in Desert Storm, and later my friend. He speaks very highly of you, or at least he used to. Alex felt the blood drain from his face as he suddenly noticed the faded tattoo partially visible beneath Johnson's sleeve. The insignia of the 82nd Airborne Division, the same unit General Harrington had commanded. Before Alex could respond, the door opened fully, revealing not just the expected legal aid attorney, but the imposing figure of General James Harrington himself, his military bearing unmistakable even in civilian clothes. His normally warm eyes were cold as they moved from Johnson to Alex. Marcus, the general nodded to Johnson. Sorry I'm late. There was an accident on the highway. Then his gaze locked onto Alex. Mitchell. Outside. Now. As Alex stepped numbly into the hallway, he realized his carefully constructed world was about to collapse. The homeless veteran he'd just demeaned wasn't just any veteran. He was the man who'd once saved General Harrington's life in combat, a fact the general had shared during one of their mentoring sessions. And now, the mentor who had opened every door in Alex's charmed career was about to close them all. The courthouse hallway seemed to stretch endlessly as Alex followed General Harrington away from the holding cell. The general's back was ramrod straight, his measured strides echoing against marble floors that suddenly felt unstable beneath Alex's expensive shoes. They turned into an empty conference room, the door closing behind them with the finality of a jail cell. "Sir, I can explain," Alex began, but the general held up a hand, silencing him instantly. "Do you remember what I told you the day I wrote your recommendation letter for Harvard?" Harrington's voice was quiet, but carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to commanding troops in battle. Alex swallowed hard. "You said that power without compassion becomes tyranny, and that true justice requires seeing the humanity in everyone. And yet I just witnessed you showing contempt for a man whose only crime was being homeless after serving his country." The general's disappointment was worse than any anger would have been. "That man saved my life in Iraq, took 3 bullets pulling me from a burning vehicle. He returned home with a Purple Heart and PTSD that the VA failed to properly treat." Alex felt his cheeks burning with shame. "I didn't know." "You weren't supposed to know," Harrington cut him off. "That's the point, Mitchell. You didn't bother to find out who he was before passing judgment. You saw the jumpsuit and the circumstances and decided you knew everything worth knowing about Marcus Johnson." The general moved to the window, looking out at the city stretching below them. "When I recommended you for law school, I believed you understood that justice isn't about winning cases or climbing career ladders. It's about protecting the dignity of every person who enters that courtroom, regardless of their circumstances." Alex stood frozen, watching his mentor's reflection in the window glass. The general turned back to face him, his expression softening slightly. "Marcus doesn't want special treatment. He just wants fairness, the same consideration any citizen deserves. Did you even read the full report on his arrest?" Alex hesitated. He'd skimmed it, focusing on the elements necessary for prosecution rather than the full context. "The security guard who called the police has a history of targeting homeless individuals, particularly black men. Marcus wasn't panhandling, he was waiting for me. We meet for coffee every month. I help him navigate the VA system, and he reminds me what courage really looks like." Alex felt something crumbling inside him, the carefully constructed wall between his professional ambition and the human consequences of his work. "I'm sorry, sir. I was wrong." "It's not me you need to apologize to," Harrington replied. "And an apology alone isn't enough. You've developed some troubling habits, Mitchell. I've been hearing things about cases you've pushed through without proper investigation, about defendants pressured into pleas when evidence was thin." Alex wanted to protest, to defend his record, but the words died in his throat as he recognized their truth. He had been cutting corners, seeing cases as statistics rather than human lives. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. "That depends on you." Harrington crossed his arms. "Marcus has agreed not to file a formal complaint about your conduct, not because you deserve the break, but because he believes people can change. The question is whether you're willing to do the work that change requires." Before Alex could respond, there was a knock at the door. The legal aid attorney, a young woman with determination written across her face, entered with a file folder. "General Harrington, I've found it," she said, her voice vibrating with controlled anger. "The pattern is clear. The same security company, same arresting officers, same rushed prosecutions. Over 30 cases in the past year alone, almost all involving homeless veterans of color. Harrington took the folder, his expression darkening as he reviewed its contents. "Thank you, Ms. Washington. This is exactly what we needed." He turned back to Alex. "It seems Mr. Johnson's case isn't an isolated incident. Someone in this courthouse has been systematically targeting homeless veterans, rushing cases through before they can access proper representation or VA services." Alex felt a chill as he recognized some of the case numbers in the file. Prosecutions he had handled, defendants he had pressured into pleas without questioning the circumstances of their arrests. "I didn't realize," he said weakly. "That's the problem with ambition when it blinds you to injustice," Ms. Washington said sharply. "These are people who served their country, only to be treated like garbage when they needed help. And your office has been the hammer driving the nails into their coffin." Her words stung, but Alex knew he deserved them. He thought of Marcus Johnson's dignified bearing despite his circumstances, the way he had maintained his humanity even when Alex had denied it. "What can I do?" he asked, looking between Harrington and Washington. The general's expression remained stern. "First, you're going to help Ms. Washington document every one of these cases and identify who's been coordinating this targeted harassment. Then you're going to personally present the evidence to Judge Watkins and recommend all related convictions be vacated." Alex blanched. "The DA will fire me." "Possibly," Harrington nodded, "though I suspect Hayes is more pragmatic than principled. When he sees which way the wind is blowing, he'll distance himself from the scandal and maybe even position himself as the reformer who uncovered it." "And if he doesn't?" Alex asked, already knowing the answer. "Then you'll have lost a job but found your integrity." The general's gaze was unwavering. "You need to decide what kind of lawyer, what kind of man you want to be, Mitchell." The weight of the moment pressed down on Alex. Everything he had worked for, Harvard Law, his rising position in the DA's office, the political connections he had carefully cultivated, all of it could vanish. And yet, something else was stirring within him, something that felt surprisingly like relief. "I'll do it," he said finally. "All of it. And I'd like to start by talking to Mr. Johnson properly, not as a prosecutor, but as someone who needs to make amends." Harrington studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "I think he'd be open to that. But understand, Mitchell, this isn't just about one apology or one case. This is about fundamentally changing how you see your role in the justice system." "I understand, sir." When they returned to the holding cell, Marcus Johnson was sitting calmly, his handcuffed hands folded on the table. He looked up as they entered, his eyes finding Alex's with that same penetrating gaze that had unsettled him earlier. "Mr. Johnson," Alex began, his voice stripped of its previous arrogance, "I owe you an apology. My conduct was unprofessional and prejudiced. More than that, it was wrong. I failed to treat you with the basic dignity every person deserves, and I'm deeply sorry." Johnson considered him silently for a moment. "Apologies are easy, Mr. Mitchell. What matters is what comes after." "You're right," Alex acknowledged, "which is why I'm withdrawing all charges against you immediately, and why I've agreed to help expose what appears to be a systematic targeting of veterans in your situation." Something shifted in Johnson's expression. Not quite forgiveness, but perhaps the opening for it to eventually develop. "General Harrington speaks highly of your potential," Johnson said. "Says you have a brilliant mind when you choose to use it properly. I hope he's right." Officer Garcia appeared at the door. "The judge is ready for the arraignment." Alex straightened his shoulders. "There won't be an arraignment. I'm dropping all charges against Mr. Johnson and recommending his immediate release." Garcia looked confused. You'll need to clear that with the DA's office. I'm taking full responsibility, Alex interrupted. And while you're at it, please remove these handcuffs. Mr. Johnson isn't a criminal. He's a decorated veteran who deserves our respect, not our contempt. As Garcia hesitantly unlocked the restraints, Alex saw the general watching him with cautious approval. The path ahead would be difficult, possibly career-ending, but for the first time since joining the DA's office, Alex felt like he might actually be serving justice rather than just his ambition. Johnson rubbed his wrists as the cuffs came off, then stood slowly, his dignity intact despite the circumstances. Every person who walks into a courtroom has a story, Mr. Mitchell, he said quietly. Some are guilty, some innocent, most somewhere in between. But all of them deserve to have their story heard before judgment is passed. I won't forget that again, Alex promised, knowing this moment would define his career and his character, far more than any conviction ever could. District Attorney William Hayes's office occupied the corner suite on the courthouse's 4th floor, with windows overlooking both the city skyline and the memorial park dedicated to fallen officers. The walls were adorned with photographs of Hayes shaking hands with governors, senators, and 2 presidents. It was a shrine to political ambition, thinly disguised as public service. Alex sat rigidly in the visitor's chair, his case files neatly arranged on his lap, waiting as Hayes finished a phone call. The DA's dismissive wave had kept him silent for nearly 10 minutes, a power play Alex himself had used on defendants countless times before. Mitchell, Hayes finally said, hanging up without a goodbye. What's this urgent matter that couldn't wait? The Thompson case starts tomorrow, and I expected you'd be prepping your opening statement. Sir, I need to discuss the Marcus Johnson case. Hayes frowned, clearly searching his memory. Johnson? The vagrant from this morning? What about him? I've dropped the charges. The DA's expression hardened. You did what? Without consulting me? The arrest was improper, possibly illegal. Mr. Johnson is a decorated veteran who was waiting for a scheduled meeting with General James Harrington when security called the police. Harrington? The military advisor to Senator Collins? Hayes's political radar immediately pinged. Why wasn't I informed of this connection? Because it shouldn't matter, Alex replied, surprising himself with his boldness. Mr. Johnson deserved fair treatment regardless of who his friends are. But while investigating his case, we've uncovered what appears to be a pattern of targeted harassment against homeless veterans, particularly men of color. Alex placed the file folder on Hayes's desk, opening it to reveal Ms. Washington's meticulously documented cases. 37 cases in the past year. Same security company, same arresting officers, similar rushed prosecutions, many handled by our office without proper scrutiny. Hayes scanned the documents, his expression unreadable. And you're bringing this to me because we need to review all these convictions immediately. These cases were processed with minimal investigation, questionable evidence, and extreme pressure for plea deals. The DA leaned back in his chair, studying Alex with new interest. Let me make sure I understand. You want to potentially overturn dozens of convictions our office secured, creating a public relations nightmare, because some homeless vets got rousted for loitering? Alex felt his resolve hardening. No, sir. I want to correct a pattern of injustice our office has been complicit in perpetuating. Hayes's laugh was cold. 3 years out of law school and suddenly you're Clarence Darrow? This is politics, Mitchell. We have a 93% conviction rate because we don't waste time on lost causes or technicalities. With respect, sir, constitutional rights aren't technicalities, and treating homeless veterans as disposable isn't justice, it's oppression. The DA's eyes narrowed. Careful, Mitchell. Your meteoric rise can turn into a spectacular fall just as quickly. That Thompson case could make your career. Don't throw it away on some misguided crusade. Alex thought of Marcus Johnson's dignified bearing despite his circumstances, of General Harrington's disappointment, of the decades of service represented by the veterans whose lives had been further damaged by hasty prosecutions. "I'm not asking to be taken off the Thompson case," Alex said carefully. "I'm requesting permission to form a review committee with Ms. Washington from Legal Aid to examine these veterans' cases and make recommendations for remediation." Hayes studied him for a long moment. "And if I refuse?" The question hung in the air between them. Alex knew his next words could end his career at the DA's office, possibly his legal career entirely if Hayes decided to make an example of him. "Then I'll have to consider whether I can ethically continue to serve in this office." Hayes's expression darkened, then unexpectedly shifted to something resembling respect. "You've got balls, Mitchell. Misplaced idealism, but balls nonetheless." He closed the file folder. "Take 24 hours. Focus on Thompson, secure that conviction, and we'll discuss your concerns after the verdict." It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't an outright dismissal either. Alex nodded, gathering his files. "One more thing," Hayes added as Alex reached the door. "Who else knows about this pattern you've discovered?" The question seemed casual, but Alex felt its weight immediately. "Just myself, Ms. Washington, and General Harrington at this point. Keep it that way until after the Thompson case. That's an order." Alex found Ms. Washington waiting in the courthouse cafeteria, her expression anxious. Beyond her, at a corner table, sat Marcus Johnson, now dressed in civilian clothes, deep in conversation with General Harrington. "He's stonewalling," Alex said without preamble, sliding into the seat across from her. "Wants me to focus on the Thompson case and discuss the veterans afterward." Washington's face fell. Meanwhile, 3 more homeless vets were arrested this morning. Same pattern, same officers. Alex felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Hayes asked who else knows about our findings. "I'm concerned he's more interested in damage control than justice." "Of course he is," she replied bitterly. "His re-election campaign starts in 6 months. The last thing he wants is a scandal about his office systematically violating veterans' rights." Their conversation paused as Marcus and the general approached their table. Johnson moved with unexpected grace for a man who had spent the previous night on a concrete cell floor. Up close, Alex noticed details he'd missed earlier: the slight limp favoring his right leg, the careful way he held his left arm, the watchful eyes that seemed to catalog every exit. "Mr. Mitchell," Johnson acknowledged him with a slight nod. "Ms. Washington tells me you're having second thoughts about your career path." "Not about being a prosecutor," Alex clarified. "Just about what kind of prosecutor I want to be." Harrington pulled out chairs for himself and Johnson. "Hayes is a political animal. He won't act unless forced to, or unless he sees advantage in it. Which means we need leverage," Washington added, lowering her voice. "And I think I've found some. The security company that initiated most of these arrests, Summit Security, they received an exclusive contract for all county buildings 3 years ago, despite submitting a bid 30% higher than competitors." Alex frowned. "That's unusual, but not necessarily." "The owner is Hayes's brother-in-law," she finished. The implication hung in the air between them. If the security company was targeting homeless veterans and Hayes's office was expediting their prosecutions, the connection suggested something far more sinister than mere negligence. "That's circumstantial at best," Alex cautioned, his prosecutor's mind automatically assessing the evidence. "But worth investigating," Harrington countered, "especially given this." He slid a document across the table, a VA housing voucher application with a red "Denied" stamp across it. Marcus applied for housing assistance 6 times in the past 3 years. Each denial cited his criminal record, arrests that were later dismissed, but remained in the system long enough to disqualify him. "That's not how it's supposed to work," Washington said. Dismissed charges shouldn't affect housing eligibility. Unless someone wanted them to, Johnson said quietly. Many of my friends experienced the same pattern. Arrest, dismissal weeks later, housing application denied, repeat. It keeps us on the streets, visible, vulnerable to the next arrest. Alex felt a chill as the pieces aligned in his mind. A cycle that generates arrests, statistics, and budget justifications. Hayes gets to show he's tough on quality-of-life crimes, the security company gets more funding to address the problem, and the real estate developers don't have to worry about homeless veterans near their luxury condos. Exactly, Johnson nodded. And somewhere in that cycle, actual human beings are treated as inconveniences to be removed rather than citizens to be served. As the implications settled over the table, Alex's phone buzzed with a text from Hayes. "My office, now." "I have to go," he said, standing reluctantly. "The Thompson case starts tomorrow, and Hayes expects—" "Go," General Harrington encouraged. "We'll continue gathering evidence, but Mitchell," he added, his voice dropping, "watch yourself. If we're right about this, there are powerful people who won't appreciate your sudden attack of conscience." Alex nodded, suddenly aware of how quickly his professional world was shifting beneath his feet. As he walked back toward the elevators, he noticed something he'd overlooked on countless previous visits, a small plaque beside the courthouse entrance, its bronze surface dulled with age. Equal justice under law. He wondered how many other promises he'd been blind to in his rush to climb the prosecutorial ladder. Hayes wasn't alone when Alex entered his office. A tall man in an impeccably tailored suit stood by the window, his silver hair and commanding presence immediately recognizable. Richard Summit, CEO of Summit Security, and more relevantly, Hayes's brother-in-law. "Mitchell, good timing," Hayes said with forced joviality. Richard was just expressing concerns about security at the courthouse during the Thompson trial. High-profile case like this attracts all sorts of undesirables. Summit turned, offering a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Mitchell, Bill speaks highly of your work." Alex nodded cautiously, hyper-aware of the file on homeless veteran cases tucked in his briefcase. "Mr. Summit, I wasn't aware security was a concern for this trial." "Just precautionary," Summit replied smoothly. "My company prides itself on proactive threat management. Speaking of which, I understand there was an incident with a vagrant this morning." The calculated casualness of the question raised Alex's internal alarms. "A misunderstanding that's been resolved," he said carefully. Hayes cleared his throat. "Richard's company has compiled some interesting data on the correlation between homeless encampments and criminal activity in the courthouse vicinity. He's proposing an enhanced security initiative." Summit nodded. "We've documented a 30% increase in quality-of-life offenses within 3 blocks of the courthouse. With additional funding, we could implement a more aggressive approach to keeping the area clear." "Clear of what exactly?" Alex asked, unable to keep the edge from his voice. Summit's eyes narrowed slightly. "Public nuisances, loitering, aggressive panhandling, the sort of disorder that creates an environment where serious crime flourishes." "Broken windows theory," Alex noted. "Controversial approach these days." "Only among those who don't have to step over human waste on their way to work," Summit countered. "The businesses around the courthouse deserve protection." Hayes interjected before Alex could respond. "Richard's company is preparing a proposal for the county commissioners. More patrols, faster response times, better coordination with the DA's office for prosecution of repeat offenders." The pieces aligned with disturbing clarity in Alex's mind. Summit's company creates the arrests, Hayes's office processes them. Both benefit from inflated statistics and budget increases, while vulnerable citizens pay the price. "Sounds comprehensive," Alex managed, struggling to keep his expression neutral. "Is that all you needed from me, sir? I should prepare for tomorrow." Hayes studied him for a moment. The Thompson case is your priority, Mitchell. Nothing else. Understood? Perfectly, sir. As Alex left the office, he heard Summit ask quietly, "Is he reliable, Bill?" Hayes's response was lost as the door closed behind him. The courthouse was nearly empty as evening approached. Alex sat alone in a small conference room, the Thompson case files spread before him, but his mind elsewhere. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Library basement, 10 minutes, come alone. CW." His curiosity piqued. Alex gathered his files and headed to the courthouse library, a seldom-used relic in the digital age. The basement level smelled of old paper and dust. Between towering shelves of bound case law stood a thin woman with worried eyes and courthouse security uniform. "Mr. Mitchell? I'm Claire Wilson. I work security at the employee entrance." She glanced nervously over her shoulder. "I heard you're looking into Summit Security's arrests of homeless vets." Alex approached cautiously. "Where did you hear that?" "Word travels. Look, I don't have much time." She pulled a thumb drive from her pocket. 3 months ago, I was assigned to monitor the cameras covering the North Plaza. That's where most of the veteran arrests happen. I started noticing patterns. The same Summit officers would approach homeless people who weren't causing any trouble, provoke them, then call for backup claiming aggression. "You have footage?" She nodded. "And internal emails. Summit officers are given quotas, minimum numbers of removals per shift. They get bonuses for exceeding targets." Alex took the thumb drive. "Why are you showing me this?" Claire's expression hardened. "My brother came back from Afghanistan with PTSD. Couldn't hold a job, ended up on the streets for a while. He could have been one of these men. What Summit's doing isn't security. It's harassment for profit. This could cost you your job. Some things matter more than a paycheck, Mr. Mitchell." She checked her watch. "I need to get back before I'm missed. There's contact information on the drive if you need to reach me. Be careful who you trust with this." After she left, Alex plugged the drive into his laptop. The videos were damning. Summit officers clearly instigating confrontations, surrounding veterans who were simply sitting or standing, escalating situations unnecessarily. The emails were worse, explicit directions to target undesirables in areas slated for redevelopment, with specific mention of creating documented patterns of criminal activity to support housing denials. Alex's phone rang. "Ms. Washington." "I've been researching those property records," she said without preamble. 3 development companies have purchased buildings around the courthouse in the past 2 years. All 3 list Summit Holdings as a minority investor. Summit Holdings? Richard Summit's investment company. And guess who sits on the board? Our esteemed district attorney. Alex's stomach clenched. Hayes has a financial interest in clearing homeless people from areas where he's invested? Exactly. Conflict of interest doesn't begin to cover it. "I have video evidence of Summit's tactics," Alex told her, "and internal communications about deliberate targeting." "We need to move quickly," Washington urged. "Another veteran was arrested an hour ago. Gabriel Torres, amputee, Purple Heart recipient. They're holding him overnight. Arraignment tomorrow morning." Alex checked his watch. 9:30 p.m. "The Thompson trial starts at 10 a.m. I can't be in 2 courtrooms at once. General Harrington is already working his contacts at the VA to get Torres legal representation, but we need someone inside the DA's office who can intercept this case before it gets processed like the others." Alex thought of the veteran sitting in a cell while he debated his career priorities. "I'll figure something out. Meanwhile, make copies of everything we have, the security footage, emails, property records. If Hayes is involved in this, he won't hesitate to destroy evidence." After ending the call, Alex sat in the dim library basement, the weight of his decisions pressing down on him. The Thompson case could cement his reputation as a rising star prosecutor. Walking away from it to pursue justice for homeless veterans would almost certainly end his career at the DA's office. He thought of Marcus Johnson's dignified resilience, of Claire Wilson risking her job, of Gabriel Torres spending the night in jail for the crime of existing in the wrong place. Then he thought of Hayes and Summit, calculating profits from human suffering. His decision crystallized with unexpected clarity. Morning found Alex in courtroom 3B, not preparing for the Thompson trial, but waiting for Gabriel Torres's arraignment. He had called in sick for the Thompson case, recommending another prosecutor take over, a career-limiting move that had prompted 3 increasingly angry calls from Hayes. The small courtroom was nearly empty, just Alex, Ms. Washington, and to his surprise, Marcus Johnson and General Harrington sitting in the back row. The bailiff called the court to order as Judge Michaels entered, a no-nonsense veteran of the bench known for his efficient processing of cases. First case, State versus Gabriel Torres, the clerk announced. The bailiff led in Torres, a Latino man in his early 30s, his right pant leg pinned up where his leg should have been. He balanced on crutches, his expression a mixture of weariness and resignation. "Your Honor," Alex said, rising before the proceedings could formally begin. "Alexander Mitchell for the District Attorney's Office. The state is dropping all charges against Mr. Torres and requests his immediate release." Judge Michaels peered over his glasses. "On what grounds, Counselor?" Alex straightened his shoulders. "On the grounds that his arrest was improper, possibly illegal, and part of a pattern of targeted harassment against homeless veterans that this court can no longer ignore." The judge's eyebrows rose as murmurs sounded from the few spectators. "That's quite an allegation, Mr. Mitchell. Does the DA's office have an official position on this pattern you're alleging?" "I am here representing the District Attorney's Office," Alex stated firmly, knowing the half-truth would likely cost him his job. "And I am prepared to present evidence that Mr. Torres and dozens of other veterans have been systematically targeted for arrest without cause, processed without adequate representation, and convicted without justice." Judge Michaels studied him for a long moment. "Mr. Mitchell, approach the bench." As Alex stepped forward, he caught Marcus Johnson's approving nod from the back of the courtroom. Whatever happened next, he knew he was finally on the right side. Judge Michaels leaned forward, his voice low enough that only Alex could hear. "Mitchell, are you committing career suicide in my courtroom this morning?" "Possibly, Your Honor," Alex admitted, "but I believe the integrity of the justice system is at stake." The judge studied him, decades of experience allowing him to read beyond the words. "You understand that once you make these allegations on the record, there's no going back?" "Yes, sir." Michaels sat back. "Very well. For the record, the charges against Mr. Torres are dismissed. Bailiff, please remove his restraints." He fixed Alex with a penetrating gaze. "Mr. Mitchell, I expect a full briefing on these allegations in my chambers in 1 hour. Bring your evidence and any affected parties." As Torres's handcuffs were removed, the courtroom doors burst open. District Attorney Hayes strode in, his face flushed with barely controlled rage, followed by 2 assistant prosecutors. "Your Honor, there's been a misunderstanding," Hayes announced. "Mr. Mitchell is not authorized to dismiss these charges. In fact, he was supposed to be prosecuting the Thompson case in courtroom 5 this morning." Judge Michaels's expression hardened. "Mr. Hayes, how fortunate that you could join us. I was just about to schedule a hearing regarding some troubling allegations about arrest patterns in this jurisdiction. Whatever Mitchell has told you has not yet been fully articulated," the judge interrupted, "but will be in my chambers in 1 hour. Given that these allegations involve the District Attorney's Office directly, I suggest you clear your calendar, Mr. Hayes." Hayes's glare could have melted steel as he turned to Alex. "Mitchell, outside, now." "Mr. Mitchell will be staying right here," Ms. Washington said, standing. "As counsel for the recently released Mr. Torres, we have matters to discuss." The strategic move bought Alex time as Hayes was forced to retreat, though not before muttering, "This isn't over," as he passed. Gabriel Torres approached shakily on his crutches, disbelief written across his features. "What just happened?" Alex extended his hand. "Justice, Mr. Torres. Belated, but justice nonetheless." Torres's grip was firm despite his obvious exhaustion. "They said I was aggressive toward the security guards, but I was just sitting there waiting for the VA shuttle." "We know," Ms. Washington assured him. "You're the latest victim in a pattern we're exposing today." General Harrington and Marcus Johnson joined them as the courtroom emptied. "Bold move, Mitchell," the general said. "Hayes won't forget this." "Or forgive it," Marcus added, though his approving nod took the sting from the words. Alex checked his watch. "We have less than an hour to organize our presentation for Judge Michaels. Ms. Washington, do you have copies of everything?" She patted her briefcase. "Videos, emails, property records, statistical analysis of arrest patterns, all here." "I've brought something else," Harrington said, producing a folder. "Service records for every veteran arrested in this pattern, along with their VA status reports. The contrast between their military evaluations and their treatment by civilian authorities is instructive." The next 45 minutes passed in a blur of preparation. They commandeered a small conference room, spreading documents across the table, organizing their case against a system that had weaponized law enforcement against society's most vulnerable. Hayes appeared just as they were finishing, accompanied by the county attorney, a clear escalation. "Mitchell," Hayes said, his voice arctic. "A word." This time Alex followed him into the hallway, aware of the others watching through the conference room windows. "You're fired," Hayes stated without preamble. "Clear out your desk by end of day." "For what cause?" Alex asked calmly. "Pursuing justice? Refusing to participate in a conspiracy against veterans? I'm genuinely curious which ethical obligation you believe I've violated." Hayes stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Don't play naive. You betrayed me, abandoned the Thompson case, and now you're making wild accusations that could damage this office irreparably." "Not accusations. Facts. With evidence. Evidence that you stole from my office. Evidence of criminal conspiracy that I'm ethically obligated to report," Alex countered. "The Bar Association will be interested in your attempt to suppress it." Hayes's mask of control slipped momentarily, revealing the panic beneath. "Think carefully about your next move, Mitchell. You're attacking people with very long memories and very deep pockets. Your career won't just end. It will be destroyed." "Is that a threat, Mr. Hayes?" "A prediction." Hayes straightened his tie. "Judge Michaels can listen to your conspiracy theories, but without the backing of this office, you're just another disgruntled ex-employee making noise." Alex smiled thinly. "Then it's fortunate that I'm not alone." As if on cue, the conference room door opened, revealing not just Ms. Washington and General Harrington, but 3 news reporters who had slipped in through another entrance. "Mr. Hayes," called one reporter, "can you comment on allegations that your office has been prosecuting homeless veterans as part of a real estate development scheme?" Hayes froze, blindsided by the media presence. "No comment at this time," he managed before retreating toward the elevators. "That was Claire Wilson's contribution," Marcus explained quietly, joining Alex in the hallway. "She has press contacts from her time as a journalist before joining security." Judge Michaels's chambers were spacious but austere, no photographs with politicians, just family pictures and legal texts. The judge sat behind his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, reviewing the documents they'd presented. "This is extremely disturbing," he said finally, removing his glasses. "If verified, we're looking at civil rights violations, prosecutorial misconduct, abuse of authority, and possibly criminal conspiracy." "We believe it is verified, Your Honor," Ms. Washington responded. The statistical pattern alone is beyond coincidental. Homeless veterans arrested at 8 times the rate of other homeless individuals, and almost exclusively in areas with active development interests connected to Summit Holdings. The judge turned to Alex. You realize the position this puts you in, Mr. Mitchell? These allegations involve your direct superior and implicate the office you represent. Former office, Alex corrected. Mr. Hayes terminated my employment approximately 20 minutes ago. Convenient timing, Michaels noted dryly, though not unexpected. He turned to General Harrington. And your interest in this matter, General? Beyond my connection to several of these veterans through military service, Harrington asked. I sit on the Senate Armed Services Committee's advisory panel for Veteran Affairs. These systematic abuses represent exactly the kind of failure our returning service members face too often. Judge Michaels considered this, then pressed a button on his desk phone. Janet, contact Judge Watkins and Judge Rivera. We need an emergency meeting of the Judicial Council this afternoon. And call the U.S. Attorney's Office. They'll need to appoint a special prosecutor since the DA's office is implicated. He looked up at the assembled group. This court takes allegations of systematic abuse very seriously, particularly when they target those who have served our country. I'm ordering an immediate review of all cases involving homeless defendants processed through this courthouse in the past 3 years. For Gabriel Torres, watching from a chair by the wall, tears welled in his eyes. Will this help the others? The ones already convicted? That's the goal, Mr. Torres, Michaels assured him. Justice delayed is not justice denied, not in my courtroom. As they filed out of the judge's chambers, reporters waited in the hallway, cameras ready. Alex instinctively stepped back, allowing Marcus and General Harrington to become the public faces of the story. This wasn't about his redemption. It was about long overdue justice for those the system had failed. Marcus approached him as the media focused on Harrington's authoritative statements. Not seeking the spotlight, counselor? He asked. Alex shook his head. This isn't my story to tell. Perhaps not, Marcus acknowledged. But it is your story to live. Few people get such clear opportunities to realign their moral compass. They watched as Gabriel Torres spoke haltingly to reporters about his experience. The dignity of his service contrasted with the indignity of his treatment. What happens now? Alex asked quietly. Now? Marcus's expression was thoughtful. Now the hard work begins. Exposing injustice is just the first step. Correcting it, preventing its recurrence, healing its victims. That's the journey ahead. Alex nodded, understanding that this morning's courtroom victory was just the opening salvo in a much longer battle. He had lost his prestigious position, but gained something far more valuable, a purpose worthy of his talents and training. I'd like to help, he said simply, if you'll have me. Marcus studied him, measuring his sincerity. The path of redemption isn't easy, Mitchell. You'll face resistance from former colleagues, skepticism from those you've wronged, and your own doubts about whether you're doing enough. I understand. Do you? Marcus's gaze was penetrating. Because from where I stand, this looks like just the beginning of your education. 3 days later, Alex sat in a coffee shop across from the courthouse, watching through the window as television crews set up for another day of coverage. The story had exploded beyond anything he'd anticipated. Homeless veterans targeted in corruption scheme dominated local headlines, with national outlets beginning to pick up the thread. The courthouse steps had become a makeshift press briefing area, with a rotating cast of officials offering statements, deflections, and occasionally, genuine contrition. Your coffee's getting cold, said a voice, breaking his reverie. Alex looked up as Ms. Washington, Elena, as she'd finally insisted he call her, slid into the booth across from him. Her usual crisp professionalism showed signs of strain after 3 sleepless nights reviewing case files. "Any progress?" he asked. She nodded, setting down a thick folder. "Judge Michaels is a man of his word. The Judicial Review Panel has already vacated 23 convictions, with more pending. The U.S. Attorney's Office has opened a formal investigation into Hayes and Summit Security. And Hayes? Placed on administrative leave pending investigation." Elena's smile held grim satisfaction. Though his statement about cooperating fully while these unfortunate misunderstandings are clarified suggests he's still in denial about the evidence against him. Alex watched a group of veterans gathering on the courthouse steps, some in wheelchairs, others standing tall despite visible injuries, all wearing elements of military dress. Caps, jackets, pins that signified their service. "They're organizing," Elena explained, following his gaze. "Marcus and General Harrington have been connecting affected veterans with advocacy groups. They're demanding a formal apology from the county, compensation for wrongful convictions, and a complete overhaul of how the justice system interacts with homeless individuals." "Good," Alex said. "They deserve that and more." Elena studied him over her coffee cup. "You've been avoiding the spotlight. The media's been asking to interview you, the insider who exposed the corruption. You could be on national news by tonight." Alex shook his head. "That's not why I did this." "No?" Her question held genuine curiosity rather than accusation. 3 days ago, you were the DA's golden boy, headed for a corner office and probably political office after that. Now you're unemployed and potentially unemployable in this county. That's quite a transformation." "Not transformation," Alex corrected quietly. "Clarification. I became a lawyer to serve justice, not my ambition. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that." Before Elena could respond, Alex's phone buzzed with a text from General Harrington. "My office, 1 hour, important." The general's civilian office occupied a modest suite in a downtown building, far from the imposing grandeur Alex had expected. No military memorabilia adorned the walls. Instead, there were photographs of veterans receiving keys to new homes, graduating from training programs, reuniting with families. Harrington rose from behind his desk as Alex was shown in. "Mitchell, thank you for coming." He gestured to the man sitting in one of the visitor chairs. "You remember Gabriel Torres." Torres stood with the help of a prosthetic leg, newer and more sophisticated than the basic model Alex had seen him using in court. They shook hands, Torres's grip firm and steady. "Mr. Torres, how are you doing?" "Better," Torres replied. "The VA fast-tracked my upgraded prosthetic after General Harrington made some calls, and they've found transitional housing for me while my disability benefits are being processed." "Sit, both of you," Harrington directed. "We have matters to discuss." Alex took the offered chair, noting that Marcus Johnson was conspicuously absent. "Is Mr. Johnson joining us?" "Marcus is meeting with the U.S. Attorney," Harrington explained. "His testimony will be central to the case against Hayes and Summit." The general leaned forward, his expression serious. "Mitchell, I'll be direct. The Veterans Legal Defense Initiative needs legal counsel, someone who understands the system from the inside but hasn't been corrupted by it, someone with the skill to navigate complex cases and the moral courage to stand against institutional pressure." Alex blinked, caught off guard. "The Veterans Legal Defense Initiative?" "We're establishing it today," Torres explained. "A non-profit organization to provide legal representation to veterans facing housing discrimination, improper arrest, and civil rights violations. Funded initially by private donations, with grant applications pending." "And you want me to?" "Lead the legal team," Harrington stated flatly. "Full-time position. The salary is modest compared to the DA's office, but the work is meaningful." Alex sat back, stunned by the offer. "General, With respect, I may not be the right person. Until a few days ago, I was part of the problem. There must be attorneys with better credentials for this kind of advocacy work. There are plenty with more experience in nonprofit law, Harrington acknowledged, but none who understand exactly how the system was weaponized against these veterans. You know the players, the procedures, the unwritten rules, and you've demonstrated the courage to stand against them when necessary. Torres leaned forward. When you stood up in that courtroom and stopped my case from becoming just another statistic, that meant something. You could have looked the other way, protected your career. You didn't. One good decision doesn't erase my complicity in everything that came before, Alex said quietly. No, Harrington agreed. It doesn't. But it's a start. The question is, what will you do next? The office fell silent as Alex considered the offer. Through the window he could see the courthouse where he'd built his reputation as a rising prosecutorial star. Just days ago, his ambitions had been focused on higher office, prestigious cases, political connections. Now those ambitions felt hollow, built on a foundation of compromised principles and ignored injustices. If I took this position, he said carefully, I'd be going up against my former colleagues, challenging the system I was part of. Many of them would see it as a betrayal. Probably, Harrington nodded. Does that concern you? Alex thought of Marcus Johnson's dignity in the holding cell, of Gabriel Torres standing on his new prosthetic leg, of the dozens of veterans whose lives had been derailed by a system meant to protect them. No, he realized. It doesn't. Torres smiled for the first time. Welcome aboard, counselor. As they discussed logistics, Alex's phone buzzed repeatedly with calls from unknown numbers, reporters seeking comments, he assumed. When it buzzed a fourth time with Hayes's name on the screen, he excused himself to take the call. Mitchell, Hayes's voice was tightly controlled. I thought we should talk before things go any further. I don't think we have anything to discuss, Mr. Hayes. Don't be naive. This situation has escalated beyond what anyone intended, but it can still be managed. Hayes's tone shifted to something almost conciliatory. You've made your point. The veterans are getting their cases reviewed. The system will incorporate some reforms. Mission accomplished. Alex felt a chill at the casual dismissal of systemic abuse as merely a situation to be managed. What exactly are you suggesting? A joint statement. You acknowledge that while there were procedural issues in some cases, there was no intentional targeting or conspiracy. I announce a comprehensive review of prosecutorial practices. Everyone saves face. Careers remain intact. We all move forward. And Summit Security? The property developments? The targeted arrests? Hayes sighed. Isolated incidents, not institutional policy. A few overzealous officers, not a coordinated effort. The narrative is controllable if we work together. The narrative, Alex repeated slowly, not the truth. The truth is rarely useful in these situations, Mitchell. You're still young enough to have a meaningful career if you handle this correctly. Otherwise, Hayes let the threat hang unspoken. Alex thought of the offer he'd just accepted, of the veterans gathering on the courthouse steps, of Marcus Johnson's penetrating gaze. I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes, but I've already committed to a different path. The veterans' legal defense whatever? Hayes's tone hardened. Yes, I've heard rumors. Consider carefully, Mitchell. That path leads directly against powerful interests in this community, interests with long memories and longer reach. Is that another threat? A reality check. This isn't some Hollywood movie where exposing corruption leads to applause and happy endings. There are consequences for challenging the established order. Alex looked through the doorway to where Harrington and Torres were reviewing documents, planning for an organization that would help those the system had failed. I'm prepared to accept those consequences, he said firmly. Are you prepared for yours? He ended the call before Hayes could respond, rejoining the others with a new sense of clarity. The path ahead would be difficult, the opposition formidable, but for the first time since entering law school, Alex felt aligned with his original purpose: to use the law as an instrument of justice, not a weapon of control. "Everything all right?" Harrington asked, noting Alex's expression. "Yes," Alex replied, surprised to find he meant it. "Just clarifying some boundaries with my former employer." Torres nodded approvingly. "The first of many confrontations to come, I suspect." "Probably," Alex agreed. "But we'll be ready for them." The Veterans Legal Defense Initiative opened its doors in a converted storefront 2 blocks from the courthouse. The space was modest: mismatched furniture donated by local businesses, computers purchased with Harrington's personal funds, law books salvaged from university surplus sales. What it lacked in opulence, it made up for in purpose. By the end of the first week, they had taken on 37 cases and fielded over 100 calls. Alex worked 18-hour days, fueled by coffee and a growing sense that this was exactly where he was meant to be. Elena Washington had joined part-time, bringing her expertise in housing law and her seemingly inexhaustible capacity for detailed research. On Friday afternoon, as Alex reviewed a particularly complex case involving a Marine veteran facing eviction based on arrests that had been vacated, Marcus Johnson appeared in his office doorway. "You look terrible," Marcus observed. Alex rubbed his eyes, smiling ruefully. Turns out righteous indignation isn't a substitute for sleep. A lesson most activists learn eventually. Marcus set a paper bag on the desk. "Brought you something." Inside was a sandwich from the deli across the street and a small bottle of multivitamins. The unexpected thoughtfulness caught Alex off guard. "Thanks," he said, genuinely touched. "I haven't been taking great care of myself this week." "Martyrdom is an inefficient strategy for long-term advocacy," Marcus said, taking a seat across from Alex. "The system you're fighting has infinite resources and patience. You'll need to pace yourself." Alex unwrapped the sandwich, suddenly aware of his hunger. "How's the federal investigation proceeding?" "Methodically. The U.S. Attorney's Office is building a solid case. Hayes has hired Simmons from that fancy firm downtown. Summit is publicly claiming a few bad apples defense while privately shredding documents. Not that it will help them. The feds seized their servers yesterday." Alex nodded, processing the information. "And the veterans? How are they holding up under all this attention?" "Some better than others. Media attention is a double-edged sword. Validates their experiences but also forces them to relive trauma." Marcus's expression softened slightly. "Torres is doing well, though. Has an interview for a security consultant position next week, the kind of job his military experience actually qualifies him for." Their conversation was interrupted by Elena rushing in, waving a legal document. "We have a problem. Judge Farrell just denied emergency relief in the Wilson eviction case. He's scheduled for removal on Monday morning." Alex felt his stomach drop. James Wilson was a 62-year-old Vietnam veteran whose landlord was evicting him based on now vacated trespassing convictions. They'd filed for an emergency stay while his case was reviewed. "Farrell?" Marcus frowned. "He's golfing buddies with Hayes, isn't he?" "And his brother sits on the board of Meridian Properties," Elena added grimly. "Wilson's landlord." Alex stood, suddenly energized. "We need to refile immediately with Judge Michaels. He understands what's happening here." "Michaels is at a judicial conference until Tuesday," Elena countered, "and Farrell specifically ordered that any refiling must come through his court." The implications were clear. They were being strategically blocked by the same network of influence they were challenging. Alex paced the small office, thinking rapidly. What about a direct appeal to the Housing Authority? Harrington has contacts there. Marcus shook his head. Bureaucracy moves too slowly. By the time they act, Wilson will be on the street. Then we need a different approach entirely, Alex decided. Elena, draft a federal civil rights complaint. We'll file in federal court for an emergency injunction, arguing that the eviction is retaliation for Wilson's participation in the ongoing investigation. That's aggressive, Elena noted, though her expression showed approval. The local courts won't appreciate being bypassed. They forfeited their authority when they chose sides, Alex replied. Meanwhile, we need a contingency plan. If the eviction proceeds, Wilson needs somewhere to go. Marcus stood. I'll handle that part. We have a network of veterans who can provide temporary housing. More importantly, I know people who can ensure media presence at any attempted eviction. Let's see if Meridian Properties wants cameras recording their security team removing a decorated Vietnam veteran from his home. The strategy came together quickly. Legal challenges in multiple venues, community support mobilization, media outreach, and direct appeals to elected officials who might be sensitive to public opinion about treatment of veterans. As Marcus and Elena left to implement their parts of the plan, Alex's phone rang, an unknown number that he might have ignored a week ago. Now he answered every call, knowing it could be another veteran in crisis. Mitchell, he answered. Mr. Mitchell, came a smooth voice he didn't recognize. My name is Robert Simmons. I represent District Attorney Hayes in his personal capacity. I was hoping we might discuss a mutually beneficial resolution to the current situation. Alex's guard immediately went up. Mr. Simmons, I'm afraid any discussion regarding the investigation should be directed to the U.S. Attorney's Office. This isn't about the investigation directly, Simmons clarified. Rather, it's about the future. Specifically, your future. I'm not interested in deals, Mr. Simmons. Not a deal, an opportunity. Your advocacy for these veterans is admirable, if somewhat misguided in its targets. There are several prominent law firms in this city who appreciate your passion and skills, and would be willing to create a position for you, one that would allow you to continue serving veterans' interests while maintaining a more balanced perspective on systemic issues. The implication was clear. Abandon the direct challenge to Hayes and the power structure. Accept a comfortable position where his advocacy could be contained and controlled. That's very generous, Alex replied, keeping his tone neutral. May I ask which firms have expressed this interest? Blackwell and Reed, for one. Starting salary would be approximately triple what you're currently making. Corner office, support staff, discretionary pro bono hours. Blackwell and Reed represented half the real estate developers in the city, including Summit Holdings. The offer wasn't just a bribe, it was an attempt to neutralize him by co-option. Please convey my appreciation for the offer, Alex said carefully, but I'm committed to my current position. Simmons sighed. Mr. Mitchell, I admire idealism, but practical considerations shouldn't be ignored. The work you're doing is unsustainable, financially, politically, and personally. This conflict will eventually fade from public attention, but the relationships you're damaging will persist. Your opposition to respected institutions has consequences. So does complicity in injustice, Alex countered. Is there anything else, Mr. Simmons? Just this. The offer remains open for 48 hours. After that, certain parties will need to pursue other strategies to resolve the current situation. The words were delivered pleasantly, but the threat was unmistakable. After ending the call, Alex sat motionless, processing what had just happened. The opposition was escalating. First Hayes's direct appeal, now this veiled threat wrapped in a lucrative job offer. They were worried, which meant the initiative was making real impact. His office door opened again, and Gabriel Torres entered, now walking smoothly with his new prosthetic. Sorry to interrupt, Torres said, noting Alex's expression. Bad news? Just pressure tactics, Alex replied, setting aside his concerns. What can I do for you? Torres hesitated, then placed a small object on the desk, a challenge coin from his military unit. I wanted to give you this. In the service, these are symbols of brotherhood, of having someone's back in difficult situations. Alex picked up the coin, feeling its weight, understanding the significance of the gesture. Thank you, but I haven't earned this. You stood up when it mattered, Torres said simply. That's how it's earned. As Torres left, Alex turned the coin over in his palm, the emblem catching the late afternoon light. A week ago, his self-worth had been measured in conviction rates and career advancement. Now it was measured in the trust of people like Torres, people the system had failed, but who had never lost their dignity or sense of honor. He placed the coin carefully in his pocket and returned to the Wilson eviction case with renewed determination. The path ahead would be difficult, the opposition formidable, but he was no longer walking it alone. Monday morning arrived with a mixture of dread and determination. Despite their best efforts over the weekend, emergency filings, calls to every sympathetic judge they could reach, media alerts about the impending eviction, they had failed to secure a legal stay for James Wilson. The system that had rushed to convict him now moved with glacial slowness to protect him. Alex stood on the sidewalk outside Wilson's modest apartment building, where a small crowd had gathered. Local veterans formed a loose perimeter around the entrance, not blocking it, but making their presence known. 3 news vans had positioned themselves across the street, cameras ready. Marcus Johnson stood talking quietly with Wilson, who looked small and fragile in his Vietnam veteran's cap, clutching a duffel bag containing his most precious possessions. "Any word from the federal court?" Elena asked, joining Alex with coffee cups for both of them. Alex shook his head. "Judge is reviewing our petition, which means she's calculating the political cost of intervening versus the legal principles at stake. At least the media showed up." Elena nodded toward the reporters. "Meridian Properties won't appreciate this coverage." As if summoned by their conversation, a black SUV pulled up, and Robert Simmons emerged, accompanied by 2 men in suits and the building manager. They conferred briefly before approaching the entrance where the veterans stood. "Mr. Wilson," Simmons called. "I represent Meridian Properties. I'm afraid the court has authorized your removal from the premises. We'd like to proceed with minimal disruption." Wilson straightened his shoulders, his weathered face set with dignity despite his obvious anxiety. "This is my home. I've paid my rent on time for 12 years. The only reason you're putting me out is because I spoke up about how Summit Security and the DA's office treated veterans like me." Simmons's expression remained professionally neutral. "The eviction is based on lease violations documented prior to the current investigation. This is simply a contractual matter, not retaliation. Documented by the same security company and prosecuted by the same DA's office now under federal investigation," Alex interjected, stepping forward. "Quite a coincidence?" Simmons turned, noticing Alex for the first time. "Mr. Mitchell, I see you've declined our generous offer." "I found the terms morally unacceptable," Alex replied. "A pity." Simmons nodded to the men accompanying him. "Please proceed with the eviction." The men moved forward, only to find their path blocked by Gabriel Torres, who had arrived with several other veterans. "You'll want to reconsider that approach," Torres said calmly. "Unless Meridian Properties wants tonight's news to show them forcibly removing decorated veterans who are peacefully supporting a Vietnam veteran being evicted on questionable grounds." Simmons assessed the situation, the growing crowd, the cameras, the determined veterans, and clearly recalculated his strategy. "Perhaps a brief delay would be appropriate while we review the situation." 24 hours, Alex countered, "during which Mr. Wilson remains in his home while we continue pursuing legal remedies." 12 hours, Simmons responded, "and any further legal challenges must account for the valid court order already in place." Before Alex could respond, a commotion at the street corner drew everyone's attention. A black town car had arrived, and from it emerged Judge Michaels, who was supposed to be at a judicial conference until Tuesday. He walked briskly toward the gathered crowd, his expression stern. "Your Honor," Simmons began, clearly surprised. "This is unexpected." "Evidently," Michaels replied dryly. "Mr. Simmons, I received a rather concerning call from a colleague at the federal court about an emergency petition that crossed her desk this morning. Since I was only an hour away, I thought I'd come see for myself what warranted such urgent attention." He turned to Wilson, his tone softening. "Mr. Wilson, I believe we've met during the review of your prior convictions." Wilson nodded respectfully. "Yes, Your Honor. You vacated my trespassing charges last week." "So I did." Michaels turned back to Simmons. "Which makes this eviction proceeding, based as it is on those now vacated charges, legally questionable at best and retaliatory at worst." "Judge Farrell has already ruled," Simmons began. "Judge Farrell," Michaels interrupted, "has recused himself from all matters related to the Summit investigation as of this morning, due to his previously undisclosed connections to Meridian Properties. An oversight, I'm sure." The news rippled through the gathered crowd. Alex exchanged glances with Elena, who looked as surprised as he felt. "In light of these developments," Michaels continued, "I'm issuing a temporary stay on this eviction pending full review by the Judicial Council. Mr. Wilson will remain in his home until a proper hearing can be conducted with all relevant facts considered." He fixed Simmons with a pointed stare. "Unless Meridian Properties wishes to contest my authority in this matter." Simmons, recognizing defeat, managed a tight smile. "Of course not, Your Honor. We respect the court's decision and will await the council's review." As Simmons and his associates retreated to their vehicle, a spontaneous cheer erupted from the gathered veterans. Wilson stood straighter, tears gathering in his eyes as people patted his back and shook his hand. Judge Michaels approached Alex, speaking quietly. "That federal filing was creative work, Mitchell. Unorthodox, but effective in drawing attention to the proper issues." "Thank you for coming, Your Honor. If I may ask, what made you leave the conference early?" Michaels glanced at the celebrating veterans. "I received a call from General Harrington last night. He mentioned that the judicial conference could manage without me, but that justice in this city might not. He was right." The judge straightened his tie. "The corruption you've exposed goes deeper than any of us initially realized. Judge Farrell isn't the only one with compromising connections." "How bad is it?" Alex asked. "Bad enough that the State Judicial Ethics Committee has opened a formal investigation into 3 judges in this district. Bad enough that the governor called me personally this morning." The implications were staggering. What had begun as a single case of injustice against Marcus Johnson had revealed systemic corruption extending to the highest levels of the local judiciary. As Michaels departed, Marcus joined Alex, watching Wilson being escorted back into his apartment by supportive fellow veterans. "Small victory," Marcus observed. "But significant," Alex replied. "They're getting desperate, making mistakes. Simmons offering me that job, Farrell's obvious conflict of interest, this attempted eviction while the investigation is ongoing. They're reacting instead of strategizing." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. When systems of power face legitimate challenges, they often respond first with arrogance, then with clumsy attempts at coercion. Only when those fail do they begin to consider actual change. "You sound like you've seen this pattern before." "In various forms, across different systems." Marcus studied Alex's face. "You're learning quickly, though. A month ago, would you have recognized that job offer for what it was?" Alex considered the question honestly. "Probably not. I'd likely have seen it as recognition of my talents rather than an attempt to neutralize my effectiveness." "Growth," Marcus said simply. "Painful, but necessary." As they spoke, Robert Simmons approached, his professional demeanor intact despite his recent setback. "Mitchell," he acknowledged with a nod. "Mr. Johnson, a clever maneuver today, but this is far from over. My clients are prepared for a long engagement." "So are we," Alex replied. "Are you? Really?" Simmons raised an eyebrow. "Your little organization operates on donations and goodwill. My clients have virtually unlimited resources and political connections that survive election cycles. This David and Goliath narrative makes for good press, but reality favors the established order." Marcus smiled slightly. "You might want to revisit that particular biblical story, Mr. Simmons. As I recall, David won." Simmons's expression hardened momentarily before he regained his composure. "Just consider the long-term consequences of your choices, Mitchell. There's still a place for you in the established legal community if you moderate your approach." After Simmons departed, Alex and Marcus walked back toward the Veterans Legal Defense Initiative office. The morning's victory had energized them, but both understood it was merely one battle in a much larger war. "He's right about their resources," Alex acknowledged. "We're operating on a shoestring budget compared to what they can bring to bear." "True," Marcus agreed, "but we have something they don't." "What's that?" "Moral clarity, and increasingly, public opinion." Marcus gestured to where reporters were interviewing Wilson and other veterans. "Every time they try to silence these men and women, they create more witnesses to their own corruption. Eventually, even their money and connections won't be enough to overcome the weight of exposed truth." Alex felt something unfamiliar as they walked, a sense of purpose untethered from ambition, of professional satisfaction based on justice rather than victory. The path ahead remained difficult, the opposition formidable, but for perhaps the first time in his legal career, he was fighting for something larger than his own advancement, and that made all the difference. 3 weeks later, the Veterans Legal Defense Initiative had expanded into 2 additional rooms of their modest building. Volunteers, law students, retired attorneys, veterans with administrative experience, filled every available space. What had begun as an emergency response to injustice had evolved into a structured operation with growing influence. Alex stood before the initiative's newly formed advisory board, General Harrington, Marcus Johnson, Judge Michaels, who had recused himself from related cases to support the cause, Elena Washington, and 3 veteran representatives including Gabriel Torres. "The federal investigation has secured its first indictments," Alex announced, placing the documents on the conference table. "William Hayes and Richard Summit are both charged with conspiracy, civil rights violations, and corruption. 8 Summit security officers have been indicted on lesser charges, with 3 turning state's evidence." "And Judge Farrell?" Elena asked. "Resigned this morning, ahead of the Judicial Ethics Committee's findings. 2 more judges are under investigation." Harrington nodded approvingly. "Progress, but we can't lose momentum. The system will try to isolate these cases as bad apples, rather than acknowledging the structural problems." "Agreed," Alex continued, "which is why we've prepared this." He distributed folders containing a comprehensive reform proposal. A complete overhaul of how the county justice system interacts with homeless individuals, especially veterans. Independent oversight of prosecutorial discretion, mandatory trauma-informed training for law enforcement, housing-first diversion programs instead of prosecution for minor offenses. Torres reviewed the document with a practiced eye. "This is thorough. Who's going to implement it?" "That's where the political pressure comes in," Harrington explained. "The county commissioners are increasingly uncomfortable with the negative publicity. They're looking for a way to demonstrate meaningful reform." Marcus studied Alex with quiet assessment. "This proposal has your fingerprints all over it, Mitchell. Precise legal language, but with actual human considerations. Not the work of someone who 3 weeks ago was securing convictions without questioning the human cost." Alex acknowledged the observation with a nod. Working with all of you has been educational. It's more than education, Marcus replied. It's transformation. You're not the same prosecutor who walked into that holding cell and saw me as just another statistic to process. Before Alex could respond, Elena's phone buzzed. Her expression shifted as she read the message. We have a situation. The U.S. attorney just called. Hayes has offered to plead to reduce charges in exchange for testimony against higher-level participants. The room fell silent as the implications settled. Higher than the district attorney? Judge Michaels frowned. That suggests political involvement. The mayor? Torres suggested. Or county commissioners? Possibly, Harrington said. The question is whether Hayes actually has evidence of higher-level corruption, or if this is just a desperate attempt to reduce his own exposure. Alex considered the possibilities. Either way, it confirms what we've suspected. This wasn't just about Hayes and Summit. There were political interests benefiting from the systematic mistreatment of homeless veterans. The federal prosecutor wants a recommendation from us on the plea deal, Elena added, since our evidence and advocacy drove the investigation. All eyes turned to Alex, who had become the de facto legal strategist for the initiative. He felt the weight of the decision. Balance justice for past wrongs against potential exposure of even greater corruption. We need to meet with Hayes, he said finally. Evaluate his claims before making any recommendation. If his information is substantial enough to expose higher-level corruption, it might justify some leniency. You're willing to face him? Marcus asked. Given your history? Alex nodded. I am. The meeting was arranged for that afternoon at the Federal Building. Hayes, once imposing in his tailored suits and commanding presence, now looked diminished in standard prison attire, his usual confidence replaced by calculated desperation. His attorney sat beside him while Alex and Elena represented the initiative, with a federal prosecutor observing. Mitchell, Hayes acknowledged, his tone a mixture of resentment and grudging respect. Quite the crusader you've become. Mr. Hayes, Alex replied neutrally. We understand you have information about others involved in the targeting of homeless veterans. Hayes leaned forward. Information that goes all the way to the mayor's office and the county commission. A coordinated effort to revitalize areas around the courthouse and convention center by removing the homeless population, with special emphasis on veterans who were considered particularly problematic due to their legal protections. Why target veterans specifically? Elena asked. Federal funding, Hayes explained. The city receives millions for veteran services, but that money goes into the general fund with minimal oversight. The more veterans who could be disqualified from housing and services due to criminal activity, the more flexible those funds became. The calculated cruelty of the scheme was breathtaking, not just exploiting vulnerable citizens, but specifically targeting those who had served their country, redirecting funds meant for their support. You participated in this knowingly, Alex stated, not a question but an accusation. Hayes's expression hardened. Don't take the moral high ground, Mitchell. You processed dozens of these cases without asking questions. The only difference between us is that I understood the bigger picture while you remained willfully ignorant. The words stung because they contained a kernel of truth. Alex had been complicit through his indifference, his focus on career advancement rather than justice. The difference, Alex corrected quietly, is that when I learned the truth, I chose to fight the system rather than protect it. You're only offering information now to save yourself. Hayes shrugged. Motivation is irrelevant. My information is valuable. Names, dates, emails, recordings of meetings with the mayor and developers. Enough to expose everyone involved. Alex exchanged glances with Elena. Hayes was right. His evidence could be crucial to dismantling the entire corrupt network. We'll need specifics, Alex said. Names, documentation, verifiable details. If your information proves substantial, we'll recommend the plea agreement to the U.S. Attorney's Office." As Hayes began outlining the broader conspiracy, Alex felt a strange sense of closure. The man who had once been his mentor and exemplar now revealed the corrupt foundation beneath his successful career, a foundation Alex himself had nearly built upon. After the meeting, Alex and Elena debriefed with the federal prosecutor in a separate conference room. "His information seems credible," the prosecutor acknowledged. "Matches patterns we've already identified and provides crucial connections we suspected but couldn't prove." "It does," Alex agreed. "But any plea agreement should require more than just testimony. Hayes needs to make public acknowledgement of the systematic targeting of veterans, issue a formal apology, and agree to assist in reviewing all cases his office prosecuted during this period." The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "That's asking a lot beyond the usual plea terms." "These weren't usual crimes," Elena countered. "They were fundamental violations of trust in our justice system, targeting those who served our country. Standard plea bargaining doesn't address the moral dimension of that betrayal." As they left the federal building, Alex found Marcus waiting by the car. His expression was questioning. Hayes implicated the mayor, 2 county commissioners, and several major developers, Alex explained. A coordinated effort to disqualify veterans from services and remove them from areas slated for development. Marcus absorbed this with a grim nod. "And your recommendation on his plea deal?" "That it include public accountability along with the reduced charges. The victims deserve acknowledgement, not just legal outcomes." Something shifted in Marcus's expression, a recognition that went beyond approval to something deeper, a sense that Alex had truly understood the moral imperatives at stake. "3 weeks ago," Marcus observed, "you would have prioritized the legal win over the human acknowledgement." Alex thought about how profoundly his perspective had changed since that first encounter in the holding cell. 3 weeks ago, I didn't understand that justice without humanity isn't justice at all." As they drove back to the initiative office, Alex noticed a gathering crowd around the courthouse. Veterans, homeless advocates, community members with signs demanding accountability and reform. What had begun as one man's stand against mistreatment had catalyzed a community-wide reckoning with systemic injustice. "Your work," Marcus noted, following Alex's gaze. "Our work," Alex corrected. "I just helped give legal voice to what you and others had been saying for years." The distinction was important. Alex had found his purpose not as a savior or champion, but as an ally in a struggle much larger than himself. His legal skills were simply tools in service of justice that others had long been fighting for without the privileges and platforms he had taken for granted. And in that realization lay perhaps the most profound transformation of all. 6 months later, Alex stood at the back of the packed courtroom as Mayor Carlton was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for conspiracy, corruption, and misappropriation of veteran services funds. The mayor's face remained impassive as the judge delivered a scathing assessment of his betrayal of public trust, particularly regarding the city's most vulnerable citizens. In the gallery, dozens of formerly homeless veterans watched with solemn satisfaction, not celebrating another's downfall but witnessing accountability that many had thought impossible. Gabriel Torres sat with his prosthetic leg stretched into the aisle, now employed as the Veterans Legal Defense Initiative's outreach coordinator. James Wilson, still in his apartment thanks to their successful legal challenge, nodded quietly as the sentence was announced. The investigation Hayes had accelerated with his testimony had expanded beyond anyone's initial expectations. 2 county commissioners, 3 major developers, 4 judges, and numerous city officials had been indicted. Summit Security had been disbanded, its assets frozen pending civil settlements with those wrongfully arrested. More importantly, The systematic reform Alex had proposed had been adopted by the county government, not as a public relations gesture, but as a binding legal framework with independent oversight. The courthouse where Alex had once pursued convictions with blind ambition now hosted a specialized veterans court focused on treatment and support rather than punishment. As the proceedings concluded, Alex slipped out a side door, avoiding the press gathered in the hallway. On the courthouse steps, he found Marcus Johnson gazing at the sky, seemingly lost in thought. "Justice delivered," Alex said, joining him. Marcus nodded. "In this case, yes. A rare and precious thing." The months of working together had transformed their relationship from reluctant allies to something approaching friendship, though Marcus maintained a certain reserve that Alex had come to respect rather than challenge. "The settlement fund disbursements begin next week," Alex continued. "Over 300 veterans will receive compensation for wrongful arrest, denial of services, and housing discrimination. Money doesn't heal all wounds," Marcus observed, "but acknowledgement helps. Recognition that what happened to them wasn't their fault, wasn't justified, wasn't forgotten." They walked together toward the Veterans Legal Defense Initiative office, now occupying a full building donated by a supportive community foundation. What had begun as an emergency response had evolved into a permanent institution with satellite offices in 3 neighboring counties. "The governor called this morning," Alex said as they walked. "The State Bar Association wants to create a special committee on legal ethics in vulnerable population cases. They've asked me to chair it." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "From pariah to reformer in 6 months. Quite a journey." "I've had good teachers," Alex acknowledged. They passed a small park where several veterans who had been involved in their cases now gathered regularly, forming informal support networks that accomplished what official systems often failed to provide. Some nodded in recognition as Alex and Marcus passed. "You've never told me," Alex said after they had walked in companionable silence for a block. "How did you end up homeless after serving with such distinction? General Harrington mentioned you had a successful career after the military." Marcus was quiet for so long that Alex thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured, each word carefully chosen. "I was a senior project manager for a defense contractor. Good salary, nice house in the suburbs, retirement plan. Then my son was killed in Afghanistan, same unit I'd served in. The grief, it consumed me. I couldn't work, couldn't focus. Started self-medicating. When the company downsized, I was an easy cut to make." He paused as they waited for a traffic light to change. "The descent happens faster than most people realize. Savings deplete. Friends grow tired of your darkness. Without income, you lose your home. Without an address, you can't get employment. Without proper diagnosis and treatment, PTSD festers. One day you're a respected professional. The next, you're invisible, except to security guards who see you as a problem to remove." The light changed, but they remained standing, the moment demanding stillness. "I'm sorry," Alex said inadequately. "Don't be," Marcus replied. "That experience gave me perspective few gain voluntarily. I saw how thin the veneer of justice truly is, how selectively it's applied, how easily rights become privileges when you lack resources or status." He looked directly at Alex, "including the right to be seen as fully human by ambitious young prosecutors." The observation stung, but Alex accepted it as truth rather than accusation. "When you recognized me in that holding cell," Marcus continued, "you saw only what confirmed your assumptions. Another homeless black man disrupting the orderly functioning of society. You never considered who I might have been before that moment, what circumstances brought me there, what potential still existed within me." "No," Alex agreed quietly. "I didn't. And now?" Now I understand that justice isn't about processing cases efficiently or securing convictions. It's about recognizing the humanity in every person who enters the system, their complexity, their context, their capacity for both failure and redemption. Marcus nodded, seemingly satisfied with the response. That understanding is what will serve the veterans we represent far more than your Harvard law degree or courtroom skills. They reached the initiative office, where Elena was conducting an intake interview with a newly homeless veteran, her approach gentle but thorough. In another room, law students from the local university were researching precedents for their expanding class action lawsuit against the city's former practice of discarding homeless individuals' personal property during cleanup operations. "We've made progress," Alex acknowledged as they surveyed the activity. "But the fundamental problems remain: veteran homelessness, inadequate mental health services, a justice system that criminalizes poverty. Changing those will take more than 6 months of focused effort." "Indeed," Marcus agreed. "Those are generational challenges, systems built over decades. But systems are just collections of individual decisions, made by people who can choose differently when shown a better path." He turned to face Alex directly. "Like you did." The simple acknowledgement carried more weight than any formal recognition. From Marcus Johnson, the man whose dignity had awakened Alex's dormant conscience. It represented not just approval, but a recognition of genuine transformation. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you," Alex said as they entered his modest office. "The initiative's board is expanding. We need someone with lived experience of both military service and homelessness, someone who understands the legal system from both sides. Would you consider a formal position? Paid, with benefits?" Marcus looked surprised, then thoughtful. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a partnership," Alex clarified. "Your perspective is essential to ensuring we stay focused on real impact rather than legal abstractions." After a moment's consideration, Marcus extended his hand. "I accept, on one condition." "Name it." "That you never forget that day in the holding cell, not to punish yourself, but to remind yourself of how easily we can fail to see each other's humanity when systems encourage that blindness." Alex shook his hand firmly. "I promise." As they finalized the details of Marcus's new role, Alex's phone buzzed with a news alert. The governor had just announced a comprehensive review of veteran services statewide, citing the Harrison County scandal as evidence of systemic failures requiring immediate address. "Another domino falls," Marcus observed. "Small victories," Alex said, echoing Marcus's words from months earlier. "That add up to meaningful change," Marcus completed the thought. "This work isn't about dramatic courtroom moments or headline-grabbing victories. It's about persistent effort that gradually shifts what people consider acceptable, what systems consider normal, what society considers just." Outside the window, the late afternoon sun illuminated the courthouse where their unlikely alliance had begun. A building that had once represented to Alex the pinnacle of professional achievement, but now stood as a reminder of how easily power could corrupt without vigilant ethical oversight. "When I was a prosecutor," Alex reflected, "I thought justice was something you won, like a competition. Now I understand it's something you build, day by day, case by case, person by person." Marcus nodded, his expression one of quiet approval. "And that, counselor, is why you're finally becoming a true servant of justice, rather than merely its administrator." As they turned to the work still waiting on Alex's desk, more cases, more veterans needing advocacy, more systems requiring reform, both men understood that their journey together had only just begun. The path ahead remained challenging, the opposition still formidable, but they now walked it with clear purpose and shared commitment to a justice that recognized the dignity of every person it touched, especially those society found easiest to forget.